Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to today's Hindu News Analysis session. And before we begin, by looking at today's important news articles, I need to make an exciting announcement. And this is regarding the workshop that is due to be held on 2nd March 2024, sharp at 6 p.m. Now do kindly attend the workshop because here Rohit sir shall be talking about preparation strategy for the UPSC 2025. This could make a huge difference to your preparation, to your strategy, and it could also mean a solution to various problems that you experience regarding the UPSC CSE exam. So do attend this free workshop and it could mean wonders to your preparation. Apart from that, also do tune in to the Prelims test series for 2024 UPSC Civil Services exam, the link of which has been provided in the description box of this video. And now let's quickly proceed to today's news articles which have been selected from today's Hindu newspaper, the New Delhi edition. So here we shall be taking care of 3 articles for detailed coverage from the mains perspective, whereas we have about 4 fact-based articles that are critical from the perspective of the prelims. So now without wasting any further second, let's quickly have a look at the first article of the day that is coming to you from page 6 and it pertains to Indian economy. The article talks about Vignettes of a Janus-faced economy. Now the title here itself talks volumes about the main agenda of this article. Let's break it down. When we talk about vignettes, we are talking about various aspects which describe something. So whenever you talk about a description that is very illustrative in nature, a short description, that becomes the vignette. Now what is this word Janus-faced or Janus-faced? It is an expression which means something that is two-faced. Technically something that is very hypocritical, something that is very double-sided. So we guessed it right, the entire article is talking about 2 phases of Indian economy in the present scenario. While on the one hand, the first phase is easily visible. Here we are talking about the shining India. We are talking about the increasing GDP. We are talking about how Indian economy shortly is yet to become the 3rd largest economy globally. We are talking about the increase in consumption expenditure and the skyrocketing stock markets. But on the other hand, on the underbelly, we have problems which are still persisting. And these problems are so many people still dependent on government-sponsored welfare schemes. A high rate of subscription to the public distribution system, free food system. Third, we are talking about the high rate of unemployment. Now, although in just 1 year, the total unemployment rate as per the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy's data has fallen down from 7 point something to 6.8% in January 2024, which is good news. But let's understand that in the formal sector of the economy, the unemployment data is still very, very high. So what about these problems? When we talk about the shining India vision, we cannot ignore the massive income inequalities that still exist in India, and that exactly is the crux of this article, and therefore the article primarily talks about the phenomena of economic dualism. Now the title says Janus-faced. We meant an economy that is two-faced, and this is the 2 phases. On the one hand, you have the rich in India. Now today, there was one more article in the Hindu which said that the population of India's super rich is increasing by multi-fold percentage, which means a more increasing Indian income gap. So on the one hand, you have successful, and on the other hand, you have the have-nots. So this article is talking about the gap in between, reasons, what are the gaps and what can be done to provide a solution. Therefore, we are trying to explore the phenomena of economic duality, economic dualism. The very developed segment and yet the most undeveloped segment. How can they coexist in the same economy? That's what the article talks about. Let's quickly break it down. Now the article begins by saying that today's Indian economy is nothing but a mixture of various realities. It is presenting a paradox. The paradox is that although we say that the size and growth of our gross domestic product Now, all these are achievements that are being highlighted by the incumbent government. It says that the GDP is projected to become the third largest of its own kind in the world. India is soaring in terms of economic growth. Besides, the number of people. Now, recently, when you talk about the National Multi-Dimensional Poverty Index that was released by the Niti Aayog for 2023, it said that more than 13% people were able to escape multidimensional poverty. These many people are not poor anymore in terms of various measurements. But once again, the article says that this is a very dubious reality. We are not sure whether it's true, although the index shows it. But the real picture doesn't really match this narrative, because even today you have so many people cut across gender, caste, rural lines which still are victims of multidimensional poverty. So the government says that yes, people are coming out of poverty. This is highest in the recent few years. Besides, stock market indications. Now recently we also knew how India had bypassed Hong Kong in terms of its stock market jump. It is soaring to become one of the largest stock markets in the world. So all these are indicators of economic boost and economic growth. These are the image of shining India. But then, how many years do we have left now to achieve the targets, the 17 targets of the 2030 regarding the Sustainable Development Goals? So when we talk about Goal Achievement 2030 and today's reality, we see the problem is with shining India. Now, let's see some examples of shining India. The government says that today, consumer expenditure has risen considerably. People are spending much more, which means they have a higher income. They have a better disposable income. It is visible in the sale of luxury brands in India. Passenger car sales from domestic air passenger traffic that is increasing. Increase in demat accounts and a huge jump in UPI transactions. From the sale of smartphones to luxury home buying, yes, we are talking about high sustained growth. It is also visible in understanding how, for example, the passenger car sales itself, it jumped from April 23 to January 2024 and it clocked a sales of about 3.42 million units. Similarly, we see that the number of domestic air passengers now are set to cross all-time peak of about 141.6 million. So these are achievements, but aren't these achievements creating a very premature narrative? Isn't this too premature to presume that everything is going very, very well? Agreed that today more and more customers are buying expensive luxury products, but does that also mean that everybody in India has achieved economic growth equally? That's a problem. Now, once again, as a part of the growth shining India narrative, investment in mutual funds specifically by the urban population, they have crossed 18,000 crore mark recently, just the last month. Similarly, as I said, the number of demat accounts have again jumped to about 143.9 million in January 2024. So this is the shining India, but this is not for everyone. And here we talk about economic dualism, because today we have a situation where multiple kind of economic systems are coexisting within India. One is the rural-urban divide. On the one hand, you have the urban India that might have experienced a soaring economic growth, but that's not same for rural India. Because while the overall unemployment percentage is falling, when you talk about specifically the rural disguised and seasonal unemployment associated with Indian agriculture sector, that is not coming down dramatically, it is still very, very high, which means rural Indian population is still not the immediate beneficiary of the high economic growth. Similarly, we also talk about the segment of urban poor. This is something that the article touches upon, that urban India is the new hotspot of inequality. Now, the same people of the urban India who are supposedly the brand ambassadors of shining India, spending on luxury commodities, they are also coexisting with millions more in Indian urban sector who are still groveling in poverty. For example, let's prove it. What is the proof of economic dualism as per the article? Well, the biggest proof is in November 2023, the government extended free food grain distribution under the public distribution system in India, which is a part of Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, which provides free food grains to the poor. This was about 81.35 crore. So these many people were actually depending on public distribution system of free food grains. Now this was in June 2023, being distributed through about 5.45 lakh fair price ration shops in India. Similarly, according to the United Nations World Population Dashboard, India's population is now more than 1428 million. And now out of this, if you say that 813 million people are depending on free food grains from the government, it means that 57%, more than half of our population, is dependent upon free food distribution scheme. Is this shining India? Second, in an era of high growth like today, which means that the employment growth should also be steady and uniform across various sectors. But then what explains the fact that the number of beneficiaries under Manrega, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, which assures about 100 days of guaranteed employment, but typically in the informal sector, typically in the blue collar segment, to people of the poor population, the number of beneficiaries has increased. It has been the highest actually when you talk about December 2023. It was pegged at 231.34 crore. These many people across various states in India were taking benefit and working under Manrega given employment. These again are not employments that are being usually enjoyed by women. These are not the employments that are being used by people who are disabled. These are not the employments that are being used by people who are above typically 55 years, because this is physical work. So what kind of employment are we talking about when so many people are dependent on employment guarantee scheme in India? Besides, in the last 5 years from 2019 to 2020, the annual growth rate of real wages in India has been negative. It has been very, very low for both agriculture and non-agriculture activities, about minus 0.6% and minus 1.4% of the workforce respectively. Besides, according to All India Debt and Investment Survey, the incidence, the rate of indebtedness was about 35% in rural India, 40.3% among farmer households, 28.2% among the non-farming, non-cultivator households, which means so many people are under loans for various reasons, farmers being the highest segment. According to SEBI 2023, now a lot of people claim that Indian securities exchanges, for example, India's stock exchanges are soaring. As we said, it's crossing the Hong Kong benchmark now. It's huge. So many people in India are learning. They are the new investors. They are investing into stocks, mutual funds, and short cap investments. But as per the SEBI data, this is not the reality always. Most of the people are doing some kind of stock investing that is extremely risky. They are not investing in long-term financial instruments. In fact, they are doing a very quick, immediate return investment game. And about 90% of active retail traders in India, as per data of SEBI from 2023 January, they lose their money. They lose their trading options, and the total collective loss was about 44,848 crore rupees in just March 2022. So this is technically speculative trading. That is what a majority of people are indulging in, which means the know-how, the technical knowledge regarding investment is very, very poor even now. And majority of it is for immediate benefit, not for long-term investment and growth. Similarly, another paradox that the article talks about is that during the period 24 to 29, India is expected to cross about $5 trillion mark. And it shall be soon becoming the third largest economy of the world. Well, we cannot deny that. But by 2030, we are also heading to the deadline of the SDGs. Now let's remember, if the SDGs are committed to overall reduction in poverty, SDG 1, reduction in hunger, SDG 2, further, reduction in unemployment rates, providing education, equitable education to all, clean drinking water, sanitation and health to all, how many of these SDGs are we technically trying to achieve by 2030? Well, just an economic growth, that is symbolic of a minimal segment of the population cannot be termed as an overall democratic, inclusive economic growth. That's what the article talks about. And therefore, India is still experiencing massive gaps when it comes to achieve the SDG targets of equitable growth for everyone by 2030. That is something that the article also mulls about. Now with this, we can proceed with the other article picked up for you from page number 6 pertaining to social justice. Another very interesting piece of work which talks about why we are lagging behind when we talk in terms of ECCE. Now what is this ECCE as per this article? Now this article talks about early childhood care and education. We are talking about why India, alongside many other developing nations, is very poor when it comes to providing a holistic is which cuts across various needs of a child. Inclusive is when children from all communities, cutting across religion, region, language, gender, economic status, achieve basic early childhood intervention plus quality. So these are 3 marks that the article talks about. In these 3 yardsticks, we are not very successful yet when it comes to early childhood intervention and care. Now let's remember, for the reason is very, very historic. For a very long time in India, it was believed that early childhood education, which typically talks about children from the age group of, say, 1 to 6. It is this age group which is the most decisive, the most important segment of any education system of any country. Why? Because these people are the future adults. They are the future generation, the future workforce of any country. And now when we say that India is doing poorly in ECCE, we mean that it is this age group which is getting deprived of 2 things side by side. We say holistic. So on the one hand, they are getting deprived of early education intervention. Now this is about so many things included into one. The first is psychosocial care. Psychosocial care means, indeed, all children have different learning capacities. When you impose a universal, a standard, a conventional, and old school learning system on everybody in any government run preschool, that will not solve the purpose. Because this is also the age group in which children display unique and very, very distinctive abilities. Now, although this is an age where they have the highest potential of learning, but this is also an age where children show variations. For example, linguistic development, motor skill development, numerical skill absorbing development, psychosocial development in terms of how much can they interact and convey to others, motor skills, how much can they focus on the work that they are doing. So all these are very, very varied among children, and in India we do not have any customized approach yet in early schooling, at least in the government sector, in the rural sector, which takes care of this. That's a major problem. So learning outcomes are poor. Second thing is teachers who are employed in early learning centers, typically government run, for example Anganwadi. The teachers themselves are yet not fully qualified to take care of a holistic learning development. Third thing is, the problem is of lack of material. Yes, in the government-run Anganwadis and other primary schools, we lack basic learning material, which could enable children to develop skills faster. The other hand, we are talking about, this was early intervention in education. The other is early intervention in health and nourishment. Here we say that clearly after National Education Policy 2020, Indian government has been roaring loudly that health outcomes lead to better educational outcomes. So therefore, whenever you talk about ECCE, remember we are talking about both health and learning. Here in the Anganwadi schools, here in the government-run primary care schools, nourishment outcomes are also not very good. They are still very poor. Again, the problems are funding, lack of understanding child nourishment, lack of understanding different varied physical, psychological problems of children, storage, and yet another problem is enrollment is not universal. So this is exactly what this article talks about, that today, despite claiming a huge Anganwadi system that has been successful partially, there are loopholes, there is a huge gap. So that's what exactly the article says, that yes, we need to invest more energy, money, that is funding, also focus on ECCE. Now, let's understand that the key problems highlighted by the articles are that India's children deserve better economic investment. They need better finances. They need better funding. Because India, as I also discussed in one of the previous sessions that was talking about workforce potential in India, that as per the United Nations, until 2041, India has a huge demographic dividend, which means we have a very young working age population. It is high time we tap the potential, otherwise we are going to waste our human resources in a world where most other countries are dealing with an aging population. You see, so in this case, today's children will be the peak demographic dividend of tomorrow, and hence investing in their early education talks volumes about how shall they perform in their later years. But somehow, early education for children in India has been an area that has been very, very unexplored. It has been very underinvested. So, what happens is that for a long time it was believed in India that when it comes to early childhood education, typically, as I said, the age group of 1 to 6 years, it is best done at home. So it was done very, very informally by family members, by community members, by members in local residential areas or in small village workshops. There was no proper formalization done for early childhood education. In fact, it's not very uncommon to see that across peri-urban, rural and village areas, it's very, very common to see that children begin their schooling post 5, when it is a fact. It is a proven fact scientifically that if a child goes to a preschool, that is, if a child under the age of 5 is attending a preschool, it will definitely result in his continuity in education at the higher and secondary, higher education level. Besides, if this is discontinued in the beginning, it translates into early dropout later on in life also. So this is a very foundation building skill, and that's what we are lacking. It has often been seen as women's work, domestic work. Very few people, in fact very few communities, had the realization that no, early childhood education and care is as formal as higher education. So therefore, a lot of people argue that today investment in ECCE has increased. Definitely the government is promoting Anganwadi. Now just a week back the government has announced something that's very encouraging. It has said that now under the Ayushman Bharat scheme, the PMJAY, Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, India's government-sponsored health insurance, Anganwadi and Asha workers will also be covered. That's a very welcome initiative because these Anganwadi teachers are ultimately the ones who are providing early childhood care and education. This is a welcome initiative. But have we still spoken about the salaries that we get? Have we spoken about the training that they are getting? Have we spoken about the materials that they are equipped with across various states and districts in India? No. So these are certain unexplored sectors. So therefore, today as the Indian government is committed to an economy that is governed by women, an economy in which female workforce plays a very crucial development, here we cannot avoid the role of early childhood education and learning. This translates into a better future. Women participation in the economy also. So what are the gaps in India right now when you talk about early childhood intervention? Now totally this can also be known as early childhood intervention, because intervention here is both nutritional, educational. So India's young learners are struggling today. Let's remember, a large number of standard 3, grade 3 children are unable to read grade 2 or even grade 1 textbook. They can't read it. Besides, they do not know basic addition, subtraction. Numerical skills are very, very poor right now. Opportunity cost. Now, the article says that today if you are not allocating enough learning material, whether it be digital or whether it be physical, if you are not allocating enough learning material, be it interactive books, be it materials which can improve motor skills of the child, unless you provide this, you are paying a huge cost somewhere else. Today you can save your money by not providing government schools with this learning material or training the teachers. But tomorrow the hidden cost, the opportunity cost will be very, very high. When these young children become the future workforce, what will they do? They will eventually go and start working in the informal sector. You yourself therefore are creating a huge gap. It's happening at a very early age. How will these people then participate in the white collar job segment or in the formal economy? Will they tomorrow contribute in economic growth? No. So we are beginning with the problem of education inequality right at the beginning because we are not inculcating high quality talent at the very early age in life. That has to be analyzed. Plus, international researchers, including some from the University of Chicago and Yale, have also found out that a 13% annual return on investment for every dollar that you invest in early childhood education is a huge achievement. For example, if you spend $1 on early childhood education, the return is annually 13% on it. That's huge. It is true in countries like America and Europe, but is it true in Indian context? It is yet to be done. Similarly, India needs longitudinal studies which cut across various states, various communities and various segments, a deep delve studies. So India needs these longitudinal case studies to understand the role of Anganwadi, early education. And also, we need to understand that today India's Anganwadi is one of the largest public system in ECCE. But is it completely successful? Now, that's where we need to understand that although the Ministry of Education spoke about the Nipun scheme, the Nipun scheme meant National Initiative for Proficiency, Excellence in Reading and Understanding Numeracy, arithmetic, mathematical capacity. And the government said this would be a key target of National Education Policy 2020. But even today, you see that the numerical and learning outcomes are very, very poor in most government schools. Not only at the primary level, it translates into secondary and higher level also. Similarly, Ministry of Women and Child Development's Poshan Bhi Padhai Bhi, which means nourishment scheme to be added on to educational scheme. Both should go together. This shall be done through the Anganwadi scheme, but is that a successful scheme? Once again, the same rhetoric question, not completely. So as I said, although in the interim budget of 2024, the government said that we will expedite, we will hasten, we will fasten the process of upgrading better Anganwadi schools. We will give them more infrastructure, more better quality teacher, better material and better nourishment supplies. But still, the response has not been very encouraging and the same across India. Similarly, in 2023, if you see India's situation, then the total money that was allocated to teaching learning materials, that was not enough because the need tripled by 2023. There was so much necessity. But what happened? The allotment was very, very poorly done. So 140 crore rupees from this pot, it had jumped to rupees 420 crores per annum just in 2023. But still, we could not allocate enough funding to materials. Similarly, India's poorest 8 crore children under 6 years are the ones who are in desperate need of a better Anganwadi system. Now, similarly, the 2024-25 budget expenditure on centrally sponsored schemes, they are a substantial part of the money that the government gives to state governments to improve Anganwadi system. This is much higher than what the government is actually giving to most other neglected segments. But the problem is, even today, if the government is saying that we are giving 5 lakh crore rupees just for Anganwadi to states, is it comparable to rural road development, or is it comparable to, in fact, irrigation? So we need to see that also, that despite the fact that the spending is so high, much more than other segments, why is the translation, the implementation part weak? Similarly, talking about Anganwadi scheme, now here the problem is that there is a gender and income related gaps. Now clearly the article has compared with private sector of education. The biggest problem article highlight is that the prime focus of Anganwadi schools is spent on vaccination and immunization, plus health and nutrition. When already they are doing such an important job for children under 6, then the time and the energy and the resource available for learning and education becomes reduced. That is a major problem. So what happens? 68% children in India's rural areas are still struggling to get age-appropriate curriculum. Similarly, majority of parents' expectations regarding learning outcomes in Anganwadis is getting met through private sector. But the problem is private sector is expensive. So most children of middle class families and higher income groups in urban areas are visiting urban early childhood learning centers. Either it's daycare or it is some kind of an early intervention Montessori programs. Their learning outcomes are remarkably better than when you compare them with rural Anganwadis. The difference is very clear. If the fees is higher, the material, teacher training and the time allocated just for studies is much, much better. So this is also what the article talks about. Similarly, recently Nobel laureate Hetman's Perry preschool study said that children who received high quality early childhood education are also the children who will develop more strong social emotional skills later on in life. They will also help prevent cases of violence, suicide within society. Why? Because early childhood intervention is also a period when you develop social skills also. Apart from that, they are also the people who will typically continue in higher education and will drop out in much less number. So what can we do to fix the problem and the gap between rural Anganwadi and urban high standard private early learning centers? How to use the 5 lakh crore rupees fund that the government is ready to give as a part of its welfare scheme to the states? We need to formulate evidence-based policy. Now, this will happen only when there is a proper case study and research done on how much material, learning material is being allocated to Anganwadi and other government-sponsored schools, plus how much of it is getting utilized to its utmost capacity. Besides, investing in teacher training, very, very important. A basic minimum yardstick for teacher training who can indulge with these children is again very critical. Similarly, we need to also understand that if we want India's women and children to thrive, then the ECCE centers, whether it be Anganwadi, whether it is supported by any NGO, whether it is supported by any other government school that's specifically dealing with ECCE separately, or the ASHA workers, we need to understand that until this segment is successful, it's very difficult to ensure a holistic women participation in economy and a holistic workforce for future. So that's typically what the article was arguing. And now let's proceed with page number 7 article that deals with GS paper 3 science. The article is saying that is India ready to fight the cases of rare diseases? Now the article has come in the light of a recent news where a young Bollywood artist suffering from a rare genetic health condition died at a very, very early age, an unexpected premature death. So this is highlighting a bigger problem that today in India we say that India's health sector will shortly be receiving more than 2.5% of budgetary allocation. India is today one of the top medical tourism destinations of the world, and yet we have a huge problem, and the problem is that today India as a country has neither researched much nor invested much into the phenomena of rare diseases. Now the article has not openly used the word orphan diseases, but indirectly it is also referring to orphan diseases. Let's understand this. So therefore the article argues that according to the World Health Organization, rare diseases or rare health disorders, they impact about 1 or less than 1 people in about 1,000 population, which means very few people are impacted by these. So therefore, technically talking, as per the World Health Organization, a rare disease is a disease which impacts a very small fragment of population, a very small portion of global population. Let's also understand that as per the data collected by WHO, in fact also as per the Global Genes Project, 300 million people world over shall be impacted by rare diseases by 2030, in fact much before that. So therefore rare diseases are those which typically are impacting very, very few people. And since they impact very few people, there is not much knowledge about their causes, health impact and therefore solutions. Therefore such diseases also get neglected. They are not given so much attention by the government or by the private sector research institutes, vaccine research institutes or NGOs who are working in the field of vaccine discovery or who are working in the field of finding treatments to disorders. Not much focus is given, not much funding is given. So therefore these are also called as later orphan diseases because these are neglected. There is hardly any funding or research that is going here. Hence the word orphan disease. So therefore barely 5% of over 7,000 known diseases across the world are actually treatable. Most patients who are victims of rare diseases, they either get very basic symptomatic treatment or none at all. Similarly, some people, they need so much research to even understand the disease, the nature of the disease that they're experiencing, that entire life goes in just understanding the symptoms. There is no treatment. Hence, the article has also used a word chronic. That orphan diseases and rare diseases are generally chronic in nature, which means that they will continue to impact a victim lifetime because there is no evident cure. There is no research being done. And therefore, because of lack of proper medication, medication is only symptomatic. Only symptoms are treated, not the root cause. And hence, they become chronic in nature. Now, this is ridiculous because although this is an NCD, it's a non-communicable disease, but then it will lead to a high degree of mortality. Worst, more than mortality, it will lead to a high degree of disability. Now, this is not only a major burden on the GDP on healthcare, this is also a major burden on the workforce potential. So this is something that the article talks about. Now, today being the Rare Disease Day globally, it is a good time to pause and think, why is this a neglected segment? In today's world where we are talking in terms of mRNA, we are talking in terms of quick vaccines even for diseases like cancer, cure for HIV/AIDS, then why are some diseases continuing to get neglected? So India, therefore, as per this article, is very, very poor. We are languishing so much at the bottom when it comes to spreading awareness, diagnosis about rare diseases. Now, there is one more theme that the article slightly touches upon. It doesn't go in deep, it just touches upon that India also being one such society where there are many other cultural kind of barriers too. So rare disease in India also becomes an issue of stigma actually. Sometimes victims of such orphan disorders are stigmatized by society. Hence, that further becomes a problem and research becomes a taboo. So that is also a problem. Now, India accounts for 1/3 of global rare disease with over 450 identified such disorders. They could range from spinal muscular atrophy, where the muscles start dying, they start ossifying. Similarly, the Gaucher's disease, to some lesser known ones like mucopolysaccharidosis, which again cause a very diabetes-like condition in humans, and similarly the Whipple's disease, plus acquired hemophilia. All of that. So roughly about 8 crore to 10 crore Indians suffer from one or the other kind of rare disease, but there is another problem. Majority of these victims are children, above 70% are children. That further impinges upon the need for better healthcare at an early age, because again, as we constantly say that in social justice and economics, that poor health outcome is bound to result in poor educational outcome, and that is bound to boomerang in the form of poor workforce contribution. So that's again one of the subtle themes of the article. Now, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare had created a policy back in 2018, in fact in 2017, to deal and treat with rare diseases, but it was withdrawn just 1 year later because implementation was a challenge. The real problem is that today in India, we lack centers of excellence. Centers of excellence are dedicated cells, specialized cells in which doctors and scientists work to find out solutions to unknown diseases, so that they should not be orphan diseases. But the problem is these are very few. Second problem is those which exist are typically in the private sector. So therefore, they will undertake research in diseases in which there is a better medicine market available, because naturally there is a cost analysis to it too. They will not research in diseases where medicine market is poorly evolving, because then funding becomes a problem. So that is something we need to focus upon. So a revised policy, National Policy for Rare Diseases, the NPRD, was announced back in 2021, but the problem is the policy still, one, lacks proper data collection. Second, the policy still is yet to understand government's role in collecting data. The government is not doing the primary data collection job here. So there is no accuracy of the data that's getting collected. Similarly, there is a huge concern. For example, timely and accurate diagnosis is not being received by the patients. Second problem is doctors most of the times are unaware of the nature of this disease. So therefore, they don't know how to treat it. The third problem is pregnant women who experience rare disorder are likely to have a child who will get transmitted with the disorder, which means it will lead to a bigger incidence of congenital disability or congenital disorder. What is a congenital disorder? That you acquire right from birth. Let's understand that congenital disabilities, once again, contribute to 50% of India's benchmark disabled population. So again, that's a problem here. Therefore, prenatal screening that is done in pregnancy to rule out any abnormalities in the unborn fetus are still not available. Remember, to a majority of rural population, cultural and religious barriers keep many other women from enjoying this facility. Apart from that, 50% of 450 such unique disorders are identified. They are treatable, but people are still not getting the treatment. Poor funding, poor research, and hence lack of medication. Another thing is that treatments approved by Drug Controller General of India are available, but just for about 20 rare diseases. You can get this treatment from very, very few centers of excellence that are available in the country, but they are very few, remember, and mostly in the private domain, so very expensive. Since such few, barely about 12 centers of excellence are there to investigate into rare diseases, timely therapy, timely medication is unknown. Plus, although the budget has allocated about 93 crore for 2023 to investigate and find a solution to rare diseases, but the problem is that this is a reduction from the previous year expense on the budget. So while we focus on the reproductive health care, while we focus on Ayushman Bharat, while we are focusing on primary health care, we are neglecting on another segment. It's being crimped upon. That's the rare disease segment. Similarly, under the NPRD guideline, 50 lakh rupees is allowed per patient as a one-time expenditure who is experiencing a rare disease, and he can avail it or she can avail it under a center of excellence. But this is too less, because as I said, these diseases are chronic. They will continue to bother them all their life. So 50 lakh is not even enough to afford treatment for diseases which are so unknown. If medicines are rare, they are also very expensive, and generally they are imported. Most of them are not getting covered under the compulsory licensing scheme of India. Since they are imported, most of people cannot afford this cost at all. So therefore, let's understand that the central government today needs to have a standard definition of rare disease. Another immediate thing that's needed is to improve the budgetary allocation to increase the number of centers of excellence. Apart from that, you must instigate, you must promote domestic medicine manufacturers to start producing diseases that, medicines that are linked with rare diseases. So we should talk about the production linked incentive scheme so that clinical trials do not take much longer. Import policies do not take so much longer. Licensing doesn't become a problem, and there is bulk import available at a subsidized price to the victims of such diseases. Similarly, PPP model, public-private companies can co-work and then find solutions to such disorders and their diagnostics. Besides, we can reduce the GST and other such custom duties on medications available for rare diseases. So these are certain arguments laid out by the article. Now let's proceed with another important set of short articles based on the perspective of prelims. So here we are talking about an article from page number 10. This is corresponding with international relations in the context of India-South Korea relationship. Now, currently we are talking about the CEPA. We are talking about Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. Now, recently, as the South Korean delegates visited the Raisina Dialogue in New Delhi, there was a discussion done to further expedite, to further encourage and endorse the already existing CEPA agreement between India and South Korea that had been signed much longer in 2009 and then implemented in 2010. So today, after a fresh round of negotiations between the two head of states and the upcoming visit of South Korean head of the state to India very soon, the both countries are now planning to increase their negotiation potential over the Comprehensive Partnership Agreement, which again is multidimensional. It talks about defense, it talks about ease of business, better migration, it talks about more bilateral trade. So these are certain areas that were touched upon. Now, Ministry of Commerce of Korea and Ministry of Commerce and Industry in India, they are saying that We must upgrade the CEPA that had become slow in its progress due to the coronavirus pandemic. And now the South Korean government has also requested, in fact, the Indian government to be more friendly to Korean business houses. India is a huge potential in terms of investment destination for Korean companies and vice versa. Even India's hardware companies, semiconductors, chip manufacturers have a huge market available in the high-tech economy of Korea. So a better ease of doing business will facilitate better bilateral growth for both these nations. So therefore, they spoke about more friendly relations when it comes to immigration, migration and ease of business. Besides, External Affairs Minister Shri Jaishankar will soonly be visiting Japan and then South Korea to chair the 10th India and Republic of Korea Commission meeting, the JCM. Here, future discussions will stand on few pillars such as defense cooperation, better defense production, and economic cooperation between both the nations. Let's remember, in 2020 itself, India and South Korea had also signed a roadmap for defense industries cooperation. Korea is showing huge interest in small modular reactors in India. Besides, it has also shown interest in developing space program initiatives with India. Similarly, let's talk about March 2022 in terms of foreign investors. South Korea is one of India's largest foreign investors. Total foreign direct investment of about more than USD 5 billion. Similarly, bilateral trade in 2022 stood as high as $27.8 billion, a record high when you talk about the previous 10 years itself. And India's major items of export to Korea are generally mineral oils, fossil oils, and cereal, iron and steel. So therefore, they are propagating a much better roadmap for future, even in terms of defense cooperation, better military exercises. And also this is very critical given the fear of China's foreign policies, which are being expressed as very, very aggressive in the South China region. So also because of North Korea's increasing desire to launch missiles, their increasing aggression towards their defense enhancement. That is also one reason why India, South Korea could be future partners in also working towards political security, given the aggression and the aggressive policies of North Korea and China in the South China region as well as the Indo-Pacific region. So in that light, the deal is very, very critical. Now the second article here is again page number 5, corresponding to science. A very interesting development that Honorable Prime Minister has recently, on a virtual mode, inaugurated the India's first indigenous, that is domestically created, hydrogen fuel cell ferry. Now this was built by the Kochi shipping yard. Let's remember that it is a 24-meter long vessel and it can carry up to 50 passengers. It is providing luxury comfort of being fully air conditioned. Now, the purpose is to create a better urban mobility, better urban transportation. Also, the Prime Minister said that hydrogen cell powered vehicles and mobility in India's inland, that is inside waterway connectors, is a gift to the people of Tamil Nadu. Now this is coming in the light of Tamil Nadu Kashi Tamil Sangamam, where both the states and both the cultures are experiencing a kind of solidarity. They are showing an expression of unity with each other. So in that case, it is almost coming like a gift to the people of Tamil Nadu from the people of Kashi, given the huge historical, cultural, deep age-old ties between both the communities. Now, this also is in line with India's commitment to further enhance the potential for green, clean, low carbon footprint fuel. So here when you are using the green hydrogen cell, it means that we are also committed to our nationally determined contribution, and we are planning to introduce at least domestic transport that is focusing on green energy towards net zero emission. Similarly, let's remember that the VO Chidambarar port is also India's first green hydrogen hub port. This not only includes the shipping services but also includes a desalinization plant. Again, very, very important in the light of critical water crisis. You might have read in the news how various districts of Karnataka as soon as the summer started this season, are experiencing acute groundwater scarcity, and therefore the privatization of water, that is the sale of water tankers, has shot up dramatically across various districts, typically in the capital city. So in that light, also talking about desalinization plants, about which India had also cracked a deal with Israel some time back. So this becomes a critical development here. Similarly, bunkering hydrogen production facilities are other areas that were focused upon. This is a completely homegrown technology, and therefore it has huge ramifications for future urban mobility as well as environmental betterment. On this slide, there is another article, that's page 8, slightly long article, but very critical, because we are talking in reference to the Finance Commission. Yes, we are referring to Article 270 of the Constitution, and the article overall is basically highlighting a complaint that is being harbored or expressed by Indian states, typically the states that are being ruled by opposition parties, who are claiming that they have not received a fair share of their financial allocation under the Finance Commission disbursement of finances. It is saying that the vertical devolution, that is the allocation of funds from the union government towards the state governments under the rules and facilities of the Finance Commission, has not been done in a transparent way, and the states are yet to receive their righteous share. So this is what the article is talking about. Remember, just exactly 1 week before, that is about 22nd February 2024, we had a similar article in the Hindu that was also raising a similar concern, that how can Finance Commission, rather the upcoming 16th Finance Commission, what different path can it choose so that states constantly do not feel battered by lack of finances from the union government? So the article is raising a question about transparency in India's fiscal federalism. Fiscal is monetary. Federalism is about dividing money between center and states. So the states are saying there are massive inequalities, not only when it comes to vertical sharing of money, also when it comes to horizontal sharing of money among the states themselves. So here the article's key point is that the union government has constantly, very strategically increased its share of money that it is getting from cess and taxes. Now the problem is, when the government is getting so much of its money just from cess and just from tax receipts, the problem is that then the government refuses to include it in the part of its divisible pool. So what is the divisible pool? Now divisible pool is that pool out of which the union government has to share, or which the government has to share among the states as a part of their proceeds. But typically, most of the times, it will not include things like cess and taxes of the government, despite the amendment of 2020. In reality, most of it is excluded from the divisible pool. So the problem is that the state governments are very, very dissatisfied that if the cess and taxes are excluded, and most of the increasing share of money that the union government is earning, it is depositing under the cess and tax category, then what happens? It is no more a part of divisible pool, and hence states will not get it. So although as per the recommendation of the 15th Finance Commission, the total divisible pool should be about 41% for the states, but in reality the states have claimed that they have not been able to get their righteous share. Now, not only is vertical devolution a problem, there is another problem of horizontal devolution. States are not happy here also. Constantly the states are complaining that when the government is distributing money among various states, what criteria is it using? Is it fair? They feel it's not fair, because most of the times the criteria that are used to share the divisible pool among various states come in the form of, for example, the first is that population. It is distributed in terms of population of a state. Second, it is often done in terms of income gap or income distance. That is, what is the gap between the income of the highest state, the state which has highest per capita income? The article talks about Haryana. What is the gap of this state with other states which have a very poor per capita income? According to that gap also, states are given some money. Plus, they are also given sometimes money on how successfully have they been able to collect taxes themselves. So, on the basis of their own tax efficiency, Similarly, there are many other issues also in terms of, for example, forest cover. How much forest cover does a state have? So all these criteria are typically used when it comes to horizontal distribution of proceeds. So therefore, states have constantly complained that tax efficiency is not used as a successful criteria. Similarly, income gap distance is also not being taken care of. And when the government solely gives money to states which have a very poor income, they are therefore denying the achievement of states which have performed excellent. They have performed very, very well when it comes to implementing central welfare schemes. For example, Ayushman Bharat, or for example, the midday meal scheme. Also, states feel neglected if they have done excellent job at controlling their fertility rate, their population. If they have done an excellent job when it comes to maintaining good forest cover. So you are not giving them merit on their performance when you solely use income gap distance as a criteria. Similarly, there has been a constant complaint that enough money is not being devolved from the center lower down to the states. So therefore, the states are saying that presently, whatever proceeds, whatever the divisible pool out of which states are sharing money, it is consisting of gross tax revenue, but this is being calculated after reducing the cess, surcharge and the tax collection. So therefore, the union government is not giving them all the money that they should and keeping a major part with itself. Another problem that the article highlights is that once the GST was implemented, everyone was very, very positive because they felt that this is an all-inclusive taxation, which means that any extra surcharges, any extra taxes and cesses will now be removed and everything will be submerged into one single GST, which means that the net proceed or the dissolution pool will increase. But this did not happen. Not only did the GST come, but also newer cesses and surcharges continued to be introduced, creating such a huge complicated taxation system in India, most of which was taken by the union. For example, agriculture, infrastructure and development cess in 21-22. Similarly, the health and education cess 2017-18. Another point that the article is making is that most of the times whenever the government says that we are not giving you a higher share because we are already giving you some kind of centrally sponsored welfare scheme, this is also a farce. This is not true. It is not a reality because most of the time the state governments are spending their own money in implementing the welfare scheme on the ground level. Second problem is the government is also neglecting the hard work done at the state level to implement these schemes. So that is also a complaint that is being raised. Why are we getting excluded from the gross tax revenue? Why is it not a part of our dissolvable or the dissolution pool, the net proceeds that we deserve? Similarly, between 2009 to 2010 and 23-24, the cumulative total about 36.6 lakh crore was collected by the union government only as cess and surcharge. Will this money go to the states? No, because it is excluded from the dissolution pool. Similarly, additional 5.5 lakh crore is yet projected to be further earned in the coming financial year, 24-25. This amount is not being shared. Why? Because it is being known as cess and surcharge, despite the amendment of 2020, after which it should be shared. And if it's not being shared, there has to be a proper constitutional procedure for that. But that is not yet implemented. So, what is the paradox we are talking about? The paradox is that centrally sponsored schemes are supposed to be taken care of by the government, but 40% of the cost is being borne by the state government. So what about that? Similarly, the state government often says that the central government is saying that we are giving you grant in aid, non-plan grants. But do you understand the cost of implementation of any welfare scheme on ground? It is much higher than the grants that they are getting. Similarly, state governments are sometimes spending more than they get in order to successfully implement the scheme. And do they get any bonus for implementing the scheme successfully? Ideally, on the yardstick of horizontal devolution, they should get. If one state is outperforming the other, it should get a better proceed. But that's not happening. There, the equality criteria sets in, that poor states should get more. So what about the efficient states? Again, that's a very unfair thing. So it is a matter of deep worry that union government is now paying less united transfers to states and it is retaining more and more revenue as cess and surcharge. So what could be the recommendations? Well, for the upcoming 16th Finance Commission, please address the historical problems in vertical devolution of proceeds by compensating the states who are experiencing deficiency. Similarly, we need to have a proper, adequate, systematic estimation of the net proceed in the budget documents properly done through the CAG review. Similarly, we have to also understand that legislative limits should be created for cess and surcharges so that beyond a certain time they expire. And we should prevent reintroduction of newer cesses, newer taxes in different names. It should be a united establishment, like everything subsumed into the GST. So that is what the article was talking about. And now to the last article of the day, page number 10, Nepal-India. Now, there is a paradox here as well, that recently as the leadership of Nepal and India met, the dialogue went beautifully. Indeed, both of the countries are sharing a wonderful neighborhood policy. Tourism between each other country is very, very high. Nepali immigration into India for work, again, very, very high. Indian investment in Nepal, very good. But the problem is, everything was silent on Pancheshwar multi-dimensional project. So that was the white elephant in the room. When something is a white elephant, it is a large issue, but you are deliberately avoiding that. So that's what happened. So now both the sides are talking about a multi-faceted cooperation. They will cooperate, whether it comes to India investing in better power plants in Nepal, whether ease of business is being considered, whether higher education centers are being spoken about, medical facilities are being spoken about, but nobody said anything about the Pancheshwar multi-purpose project. Let's remember recently, when Nepal earthquake happened, India had expended as a part of its neighbor first policy, $75 million help to Nepal for reconstruction activities. Similarly, in the upcoming 8th Asia Economic Dialogue in Pune, Nepal is participating wholeheartedly. A long-term electricity pact is also being spoken about between both the countries, where export of Nepali power to India will be to the level of 10,000 megawatts over a period of just 10 years. But then why is this issue being neglected? There are some problems here. That's what the article talks about. First, let's understand what is the Pancheshwar multi-purpose project. Well, it is a hydropower project that will be created in the border of India and Nepal on the river Mahakali. Now, this will actually create an underground powerhouse which will be constructed on each side of the nations, both the nations. But the problem is that although this is a wonderful initiative, it has huge benefits for future. Why? Because it will lead to better 6480 megawatt of energy which shall be divided equally between both the countries. Similarly, it will provide better water for irrigation. 1 lakh, more than about 1 lakh hectares of land in Nepal and more than about 2 lakh something hectares of land in India will be irrigated through the project. But the problem is, it has been stopped for now. Nothing new is going on, no new development. Why? Because both the countries are unable to reach a mutual consensus on the episode. Electricity is being divided equally, but the problem is Nepal says India it's getting a much bigger share of irrigation and flood control benefits. Similarly, Nepal also feels that water today is the white gold, given the problems of monsoon vagaries, drying up of underground water and massive demand. In that case, it feels that India should compensate Nepal for it. Similarly, India is not ready to accept this claim because there are other considerations. Now, let's remember that recently, last week, there was another development about Indus Water Treaty. With reference to Pakistan, India had decided to stop the flow of river Ravi's water in Pakistan. That was met with a huge UN cry back in Pakistan and even among certain think tanks. But in reality, there are certain water-based treaties and they have certain protocols. In the light of those protocols, India is yet to accept the claims that are being made by Nepal. Similarly, the discussion on this project needs a much better understanding, mutual cooperation, better bureaucratic foresight and better political understanding. It's yet to emerge. But once implemented, it could definitely mean a much better power generation, much better water resource for both the nations. Now let's quickly analyze today's practice questions. The first question here says, what is the significance, importance of promoting early childhood education in the backdrop of India's massive demographic dividend? So if we are ready to make use of our young working population, does early childhood education matter? Yes or no? So we need to talk about the significance. We need to talk about Anganwadi, definitely. Problems with Anganwadi. We need to also talk about the NEP 2020, which has made early education compulsory. We need to make a connection between early childhood nourishment and learning outcomes. And we need to talk about all the problems we discussed in the article regarding lack of material availability, teachers training, or for that matter, lack of healthy infrastructure, all of that. Second question here talks about, have the benefits of economic growth in India led to economic dualism? Paradoxical question. Exactly what the article was mentioning, economic dualism. Indeed, today India is roaring to become the third largest economy of the world. We can talk about the reduction in unemployment. We can talk about the better GDP. We can talk about all the episodes from Shining India narrative about better consumption expenditure, better air passenger freight expenditure, better consumables, better smartphone, all of that. But on the other hand, we are also talking about how more than 70% people are still depending on free food grain distribution scheme. How many people are depending on Manrega as the only source of employment? How many people today are yet to experience any benefit from the Shining India narrative? The economic gap is basically what we need to discuss in points here. And on that note, I shall take your leave for today's segment. Thank you so much to all of you. See you soon with further such exciting segments.